Welcome to Stranger Connections, where I celebrate wonderfully weird people and quirky stories. I'm your curious beast and host, Lisa David Olson, the practically world famous interactive speaker and improv ninja. Invite me to your group. Let's get everybody energized because great leaders know a connected team is a productive team. Okay, I have a fun guest today. This is an exciting day for you and me because we're going to learn a lot more about a book that I found in my local area, but it's available anywhere books are sold. This is called Finding Your Third Place, Building Happier Communities and Making Great Friends Along the Way. And the part that really grabbed me was thinking about we made it through the big pause, but we're still dealing with loneliness. Communities are suffering from a loss of trust, low levels of engagement, despair, and even political polarization. Well, I have the author right here, and we're going to go through what finding your third place means. Please welcome Rick Kyte, the professor, the director, the doer of all things. Go ahead and introduce yourself and what you do so I get it right, please.
Well, I guess if I'm on this show, I must be either a wonderfully weird person or have a quirky story, and I'm kind of eager to find out which it is.
Oh, I'll let you know. It could be in
Okay.
between. You could be dabbling a toe in each pool. That's fine.
Yeah, that's what I hope. Yeah, I so yeah, I've been teaching ethics for over 30 years and also leadership. And I helped start the Masters in Servant Leadership program at Viterbo about 20 years ago, and I've been
Oh,
teaching in that ever since. And that is actually where I got interested in the idea of third places. Is how do we help leaders make our community stronger? Because we know all these things about how healthy communities function, how to make them better, and we don't do hardly any of them. So
I love that sentence because a lot of people are going by the book and not in between the lines of the book that really connects us as people, as humans, as those that maybe someone has their doctorate and someone is just beginning. We still need to connect. So, how do we do that?
absolutely, yeah. I mean, we are fundamentally social creatures. We're not. It's not only that we aren't quite happy enough if we're not integrated within a community, within a network of people, and our relationships should be really meaningful and robust. Um, we're making a world in which it's much more difficult to do that. And when I started looking at this, I realized that for the first time in history, we've developed a society that the older people get, the more disconnected they become in their communities. And it used to be the other way around, like you got more settled and more rooted. And that
Yes.
was the whole thing. Like you'd get kids interested in joining clubs and and creating a big network. And people would get more and more settled. So the time that they're like retired, for example, they've got they they know where they are. They know what their purpose is in the community and everything else. And I talk to so many people now who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s and just feel lost, right? And that would be one thing, but then we have people in their 20s who are feeling the same thing, right? So it's a really disturbing time. And it wasn't because of the pandemic, right?
Right.
Pandemic
Right.
highlighted what was going on, but this change has been happening for a long time.
And you note that, I mean, you've been working on like articles for the local paper, The Ethical Life. You started
Mhm.
this servant, how do you say that? I always mess that up.
Servant leadership.
Servant
Yep.
leadership. Thank you. And you said you started that over 20 years ago at Viterbo University in La Crosse, Wisconsin. So the 20 somethings around this area, it's been all about drinking and going out. And now that it's cool to be sober, people are going, now what do I do? That's something for the younger
Yeah.
generation for sure. And older, there's less and less places to go and things to do or clubs to be in, or they just can't get around as easy.
Yeah. And as a professor who teaches young people, I've been seeing this shift take place before my eyes. Where it used to be, I would notice changes, generational changes over a period of about 10 years. You'd see some changes in students, but they were really slight, and you would never notice changes from one year to another. You'd only notice it after a long period of time. Now I'm seeing changes every year. It's really,
Really?
yeah, yeah. And like the issues with anxiety disorders, they've like exploded among young people. And so we have all this documentation that this has happened in schools, but I started noticing it really a little bit the year before the pandemic, 2019. And then after we came back, 2021, 2022, really significant. And a lot of people said, well, that's because these were the kids who were in school when we had that year of disruption and that affected them. But it's not. If we look at the data, what's going on, we've got this real sharp progression that started about 2012, which tells us this is due to smartphones and social media.
Right. Of course. Why am I
Yeah,
leaving my house when I can see what you're doing by the scroll of my screen?
yeah. And it's had these two effects. One is the opportunity cost. So like the more time you spend on electronic devices, the less time you spend face to face. And because we haven't really appreciated how much work it is, and work like the kind of work where it takes practice for the developing brain to read facial expressions, to learn how to interact, to learn like social manners, for example, and to get a comfort level with talking to people and talking through disagreements, especially, right? Those sorts of things. So that all takes a lot of practice, and our young people now are getting less practice, and every generation has less practice than the one before. Every year has less practice. So that's one of the things. And then the other is just like the like all of the ways in which social interaction promotes these feelings of connectedness. And so we can measure with the release of dopamine and serotonin and things like that. We can measure and then so we can see the effect on developing brains, but we also see the loss of practice. So these two things are happening to our young people. And the answer is it's the same thing that older people need. You need to spend more time in social interaction, right? Because you need practice at learning how to do it, and then you need um, to get comfortable with it, and you realize that, oh yeah, I'm a much fuller person when I talk to other people and I interact with them, and like you learn humor, for example. Humor is learned socially, right?
Yes.
So like, and if you don't have that interaction, I find many of my young people are really humor deprived in a way that I didn't see 10 to 20
No,
years ago.
I can't stand that thought.
Yeah. Well, because they know how to laugh at people,
Hmm.
because that's what you do on electronics, right? But laughing with people is a learned skill.
That's that just hurts me. You're right. We've got smartphones, but they're making us dumb.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah,
God.
we shouldn't be making our phones smarter. We should be making our children smarter.
Yes, like I saw a video clip of a little toddler sitting down and someone gave that little toddler a magazine and the child touched the picture to make it move and swiped on it to make it move, but it was a magazine. And so it started the child had a fit. Like nothing's happening on this device. It was a magazine. That was the saddest thing.
Yeah, because that like it's learning how to interact with the world, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a world of electronics, right?
Right.
So I
Wow.
wrote a column about a year ago about the kid I think he was 13, riding on a school bus and noticed that the driver was slumped over the wheel and the bus was veering off the road. And he jumped up, grabbed the steering wheel, stepped on the brake, and brought the bus under control. None of the other kids noticed what was going on because he was the only one in the bus without a cell phone.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh.
So he saves the lives of all these kids. But he's regarded at school as the weird kid because his parents don't let him have the phone, but he knows how to act in the real world. And so like
That's
it
heavy.
takes things like that to kind of shock us into awareness of what's going on, right?
We have to feel things to understand them. We can't just be told, but that takes me to you're saying he was aware, he was looking around, and he reacted instead of looking at TikTok or whatever. And that takes us to your newest book, which is Finding Your Third Place. So what's your way of saying, because the rest of the title is Building Happier Communities and Making Great Friends Along the Way. So I have an
Yeah.
idea and I got to see part of the book. So what is Finding Your Third Place?
So first place is your home, second place is work, third place is where you make friends, where you go for social connection. And what we find is that there are fewer third places in the world than there's ever been. Partly because we've been designing them out of our cities. Because third places, these social gathering places, they're in a real healthy community. There's a lot of them, and they're very easily accessible. And they're the places where you don't dress up to go to third places. You feel right at home there, and you go there on a regular basis. So you walk in, everybody knows your name. So it's like Cheers, right?
Yes.
And
Norm.
there are regulars at a third place, like Cliff and Norm, like
Yeah.
like that are always there, and they give the place its character and all this. And this idea was introduced by a sociologist named Ray Oldenburg in 1989. And what happens is the concept kind of remains underground for a long time, and then it rises in public consciousness during the pandemic because everybody's looking for a name for what we've lost, right? And we had a lot of, like taverns and coffee shops and things like that closing, some temporarily, some permanently. But then if you go and you look at what's actually been happening, a lot of these have been closing for a long time because it used to be that say you moved out of your hometown and you're coming back Thanksgiving or Christmas or something like that. How do you know what's going on? How do you meet with your old friends? Well, it used to be, yeah, you'd go to the local bar or the bowling alley or something like that, and you'd find out who's there.
Mm-hmm.
And now you get on Facebook or Instagram or something and you connect with people. So you don't have to go somewhere, right, to interact. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, so that's happened. And then people have become so satisfied with home entertainment
Right. You
that
don't
they
even have to
don't
go to
go
the
out.
movie theater now.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, like I really like Netflix, but it's been terrible for our community. And I won't get into this, I'll just mention it. Like we find that all these terrible things happen when people start becoming engaged in their community, like the quality of schools goes down, healthcare goes down, child abuse goes up, domestic violence goes up, politics gets more polarized and more negative. So all these things that we're seeing that we complain about, right? They
Right.
happen when and they happen more, and we have all kinds of evidence of this. They happen more in communities in which people aren't participating in the community and don't know one another. So if you do the things that make you happier, like going to bars or coffee shops or wherever people gather, you also make your community better.
And if we go there, we shouldn't just go there to sit in our laptops or our phones.
Right. Yeah. Because actually, that's not a third place. And some people think, oh, well, third place is wherever you go, like every coffee shop. Well, every coffee shop isn't. Like
That's
you
right.
can tell you walk into some and people are talking and happy and interacting, and other ones, everybody's silent, right? They're all plugged in. Well, that's just a place for coffee.
Yes. And the thing is that during the pandemic, if you saw someone running down the street jogging, you actually waved back then because it was like, wow, there's another human. And now we're almost back to the regular way. We missed so much, but
Yeah.
then we became so, I guess I'll stay home. These these pants are comfier than my dress pants. And so it goes. And so we all became that way. But something you said earlier was just the openness people share about having more anxiety and issues like that. And people are open about saying it. Is that kind of a crutch at sometimes just to because it's okay to say I have anxiety or I have ADD or the things that people share? I kind of don't know what to think about that sometimes. Sometimes I don't want to know. Can't someone just say,
Right.
Not feeling it today? Do I have to know about your all the things? I don't know. Maybe my age is showing, but what's causing
Well,
that?
well, yeah, in part because I mean, one of the things you do with friends is you talk through the things that are bothering you, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you would do that with friends. What we find out is, but like when you share things like that on social media, you're not talking about these problems in a way that helps you. So that's and so we talk about this. Well, it's good to acknowledge it. Well, yeah, it's good to talk it over, but just announcing it to the world, that's what ends up is that we normalize a culture of complaint. And we don't like to spend time with people who are complaining all the time,
No,
right?
not at all. That's really
So
smart.
yeah.
Yeah, so
So
don't
I
be the
don't that's
complainers. That's not fun. If you spend time with someone and you don't leave feeling lighter, that's not
yeah.
joyful. That's not where we want to go back to.
But
So,
it's one of the obligations of friendship, right? Sometimes, you need to be there for a friend when they're going through something
right.
really difficult. And that's reciprocal. Um, but you don't want to be with somebody who they're always having difficulty, right? That's the only thing they have to contribute to the relationship. And when you normalize a culture of complaint, sometimes this is where people find their need for attention being gratified. And that's really too bad because it develops into a habit. That's not good for developing your network, your series of relationships. By the way, could I mention something I found absolutely fascinating?
I'd be mad if
Um,
you didn't. You don't want me
yeah,
mad.
the number the number of close friends you have when you are 60 is very closely correlated with the number of acquaintances you have when you're 20.
Really?
Yeah, because the good friends that you develop, really good friends to develop over a period of time, and you only choose to spend like a lot of time and become fairly intimate, share details about your life with a few people that you have a really strong connection to, but it's hard to find who are those people. So you have to meet a lot of people when you're young for both of you to find one another. And so those who have no 300 or 400 people on a first name basis when they're in their 20s, they will usually end up having quite a few, say 10 or more close friends when they're in their 60s. But right now, we have only 12% of the population say that they have 10 or more close friends.
Do Facebook friends count? Because I got a couple thousand. No.
No, that doesn't count at all. I'm not,
They would
I
not be
don't even
helping
know
me if
what
I.
they are. I don't even know if they count as acquaintances. I've got
No,
people with Facebook friends. I don't even know who they are, right?
I know, I know. We could see them in the store and not even know that we're connected on social media. I love that thinking. And it makes me realize when you wrote Finding Your Third Place, when one writes a book, one learns about themselves. You can't
Yeah.
have one without the other. What did writing Finding Your Third Place make, teach you or open an awareness?
I started out writing about my parents and why they weren't depressed about the world that they were living in when I was born in the 1960s. Because
Oh,
that's a generation that, they they developed the EPA, the Protection Agency, in response to Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring. They have all these really terrible things. You have nuclear holocaust that's imminent because of Khrushchev. You have this really devastating environmental pollution from DDT and pesticides. There's really deep racial inequality because this is before the passing of the Civil Rights Act. But what do? They pass the Civil Rights Act, right? And
mm-hmm.
they come up with the EPA and um, so they do all these positive things. I was trying to figure out so why did they do that? Well, I think it's because they felt really empowered locally. that's kind of the conclusion I came. Like they had these really robust social networks, which they could talk things over, and it gave them a sense of power because they were doing things on a local basis. That makes them think, yeah, well, we just need to do it on a bigger basis too. And so they did.
Hmm.
And and that's a very different environment than young people are in right now, right?
Right.
Um, and so one of the things I wanted to dismiss the idea that when young people, and I'm talking about people in their 20s and 30s, complain about how bad things are, they'll point to things in the outside world. But it's not that, because other generations have been through like even bigger crisis than we have been, and they didn't point to the outside world. They just got together and fixed them.
Wow.
So I started looking at that, and it caused me to think more about what happened with my father, because at the end of his life he was completely isolated.
Mm.
And one of my interests in really looking into this was thinking I share a lot of personality. And so how do I avoid that? Well, one is by making sure that I have a lot of social connection, that I have friend groups, and that I participate in things, even when I don't really feel like it, right?
Hmm. That's the tough part. Because
That's the
usually
tough
once we
part.
get somewhere, we're okay. It's just the act of getting our shoes on and
Yeah.
going. You
So
rarely regret that.
part of it is this arc, this personal journey of learning that, yeah, I'm a lot like my father. I don't want to end up where he did. How do I avoid that mistake? But then I came at the end to this realization. I write about it, but it came as I was writing the book, that his community changed so much during the course of his lifetime.
Mm.
He lost all the places where he found social connection. They were all gone by the time he died in this small town. And I tell kind of in some ways, kind of a tragic story. I had a conversation with the editor of my little hometown newspaper, the Frazee Forum, and they asked if they could run one of my columns because I had written about the town. And I said, sure. And then I asked, by the way, do you know my dad, who lived a block and a half from the newspaper offices? They'd never heard of him.
Oh my. That
And
says so much.
he'd had a business two doors down from the Frazee Forum offices for 20 years. You know, um, and that's how isolated he had become. He would, like the little coffee shop, the bakery that had a coffee shop in the bakery that had
Mm-hmm.
closed. And
Oh,
also,
sure.
like all the family had moved away, and he'd grown up in an age where extended family stayed around. By the end of his life, like all his kids had moved away. One of them, living 300 miles away, and like all these things had changed in his society, and he didn't have the kind of personality that was able to form social connection without there being easy ways to do it.
Right.
And I think that's where we are today, where we have plenty of people who find it easy. Like they just go somewhere, they show up, they join. It's not a big, not a problem. We have a lot of people for whom it's not that easy, and the loss of places then is really significant for them.
That's one of the things when we were writing for Heart of Lacrosse, we were doing sketch comedy. And, what's funny now is we'll do improv shows using audience ideas. And
Mhm.
people are like, when are you going to do your next sketch show? And my husband Todd and I say, what's funny anymore? What do we relate to anymore? Who's going to get hurt if you make a joke on this side or that side? And it's a joke, but then if you have to explain it, it's not fun. It's exhausting. So all of that
Yeah,
has changed. But back when we could freely write, we were at a small breakfast place and the guys were at the counter. And we called them the old guys. And that's where the news was happening. We would eat near there to listen. So I think
yeah,
about your dad. Back in the day, that would have been what your dad was doing.
yes.
That's where the news was. You had to pick up a newspaper, actually leave the house, whether it was just on the front door. So all of that is just amazing. And unfortunately, the pandemic didn't didn't give us more of that gratefulness as when things were opening back up, you know. Now we're
Yeah,
still demanding fast service, even though we lost a generation of workers somehow. And, you know, I think
yeah,
grace needs to
yeah.
be found again, where we can just kind of go, it's okay. I could just eat at home then if I'm going to be a whiner.
Yeah,
Oh
but
my
don't
God.
eat at home. Don't eat at home every day.
Not every
Um,
day, but if you're going
right.
to be grouchy, don't be
If you're gonna
spreading
be
that
grouchy.
around.
Yeah. But
Oh,
but the argument of the book is like we have to do something intentionally that our ancestors did out of necessity. Like they had to interact with their neighbors in order to survive because they were really in all kinds of ways in daily interdependence on one another. And gradually, as technology has progressed and our societies become more prosperous, we don't have to interact in the same ways with people in order to survive, but we still need it for our happiness and for the health of our community. So we have to now try to do something that we don't have to do anymore.
wow.
And
And you say it
that's
so easily, but it should be screamed from every speaker, every rooftop. I think that's what we all need to know more about,
yeah,
doing things intentionally that our ancestors did out of necessity. Well said. Well, it's Rick Kyte, and the book is Finding Your Third Place, Building Happier Communities. We all need to do that and try harder. And if you forget, then give me a call. I'll remind you. I need to ask you before I let you go if there is a dare or a prank story or one of those legendary tales that you would let me know.
yeah, you told me this coming up, and I was trying to think of like which one because I could tell the story of the time I um, showed up at this honorary event to, to give this really big honor with a whole bunch of donors to the university. And I had to give this talk introducing this faculty member who was getting the honor. And I showed up in a banana suit. And
You make it sound
and
like that was an accident.
it did not
Oops,
meet.
I'm
Yeah,
wearing the
yeah. Oops,
banana.
yeah, I don't know how I just, I slipped up. So anyway, that was not everybody found it appealing. Let's put it that way. But I'm not going to tell that story because that's
But
in
that
some
would
ways
be
kind of a
silly. Yeah.
that's just silly. That's not really a prank. My grandfather is a great fan of April Fool's Day, he he could never get the presentation right, and so his pranks never worked out. But it gave me this love of April Fool's Day that I used to, enjoy tormenting my kids when they were.
Yes.
And but a couple of years ago, I had a class that was taking place on the evening of April 1st, and it was just this great opportunity. So I made these oatmeal cookies, and I also had a recipe for dog biscuits based with that were oatmeal, and I made them so they looked just the same. And I mixed them all up in the tray and then passed them out. And it was amazing because you were having some kids were just, like digging in, like it's 7 o'clock in the evening and you have 20-year-old kids and they can really
Yes.
dig in the cookies. So some are just devouring them and other ones are like taking a bite and they're just their facial expression was priceless. And they'd put it down and they would look to the person next to them like, how are you possibly eating this? And so I thought it was hilarious and I started laughing and I got all these confused looks. And then somebody realized it was April 1st.
Nice.
And then about half the class got it. But I think there were some that never forgave me. Like it was another like a month like how could I possibly be so mean as to feed them dog biscuits? And so
If you're making homemade dog biscuits, they can't be that bad. It's not like you're adding anything horrible.
it,
So I'm sure it was
no,
edible, just not human consumption, sugar happy fun.
yeah, they're pretty much oatmeal cookies without sugar, right?
Exactly.
They just
Exactly.
don't taste that good.
It's not like you gave
Mhm.
them laxative cookies or something fun like that.
Right. And I didn't put special dog ingredients, but
Right. See,
if
there's a
you,
lot of ways you could have gone. So
right,
lighten up,
yeah,
kids. Lighten up
ground
and
up
pretend you
Purina.
like
It's
it.
that wasn't ground up Purina flour or anything.
Exactly. This has been fantastic. I am so honored that you gave some time for me and all the things that you share because your book and your ideas are fantastic. And we only touched on a tiny crumb of all that you share in this community. So please share your
Penny
website.
crumb. I
So
like that. I like working in the word crumb. That was really good. Thank you.
I'm accidentally punny. Oh, so share your website with everyone, please.
RichardKyte.net.
Cool.
Kyte. RichardKyte.net.
KYTE. We'll find your books
Yep.
and your articles and all that you do, and maybe a photo of you in your banana suit eating dog biscuits. Who knows?
You never know what you're going to find there. Yeah. Yeah. This has
Well,
been really
remember
great.
that we can only be strangers once, and I invite you to stay weird.
Thank you.